So good evening everyone, this is Dr. Singaram. So today I am going to discuss about an important topic for your exams, neonatal seizure, which is now being commonly asked in the competitive exams. Before I start the discussion, please note that this is only for academic purposes and cannot be directly related to the patient care. When we talk about seizures, the highest frequency of seizure is occurring in the neonatal period. What is the reason for this? It is basically related to the developmental immaturity of the neonatal brain. When we talk about the neurotransmitters inside the brain, there is an excitatory neurotransmitter which is glutamate and the inhibitory neurotransmitter which is GABA. Now, in a newborn baby, there is an increased levels of excitatory neurotransmitter glutamate, which is what makes the neonate to be more prone for seizure, and that is why the incidence or the frequency of seizure is highest in the neonatal period. The second point you need to remember about the developmental immaturity of the neonatal brain is that there is a decreased connectivity inside the brain, or in other words, there is decreased synapses inside the brain because it is still developing. So what happens, even when a seizure impulse is generated, it cannot directly spread or propagate to the other areas of the brain frequently. So that is why when we talk about the types of neonatal seizure, it is more commonly focal or a localized type of seizure rather than the generalized type of seizure which we get in older children and the adult population. Okay, so these two important points should be remembered whenever we talk about neonatal seizure. Basic point is developmental immaturity of the brain. An equally important point to be remembered is that neonatal seizure have to be differentiated from other commoner conditions like benign neonatal sleep myoclonus. As the name suggests, myoclonus means you all know that it's a rapid movement, okay? It's a rapid jerky movement, okay? Many of the parents bring the child with a complaint that the child is having this rapid jerky movement, and if you carefully look into the history, they will tell you that these movements are occurring only during sleep. This is a very benign condition. EEG will be normal, child will be otherwise normal, no neurological problem. This condition is called benign neonatal sleep myoclonus. This condition usually persists till the first 3 months of life, then it is going to settle after that. There won't be any neurological problem for the child. The key word is sleep myoclonus. That is a point to be remembered. The second one to be remembered is something called as a jitteriness. Jitteriness is something which is stimulus evoked. That means the child throws up a sudden response following a loud sound, something like that. So it is stimulus evoked response, which appears to be a seizure, but it can be differentiated from the seizure in so many ways. One is that if you just passively flex the child's limbs, okay, or you give a slight restraint, then this jitteriness will disappear, whereas a seizure will not disappear even with restraint. So the point I want to emphasize is that the jitteriness is usually controlled by restraint or restricting that particular extremity, whereas seizure will not be controlled. Second is that there is no associated eye movements in case of jitteriness, whereas seizure is usually associated with tonic deviation of the eyes to one side. Second is that there are no autonomic manifestations in case of jitteriness, whereas in seizure you can get autonomic manifestation like changes in the respiratory pattern or the respiratory rate. You can have tachycardia, okay, which are all due to autonomic involvement, whereas there is no autonomic involvement in case of jitteriness. These points helps to differentiate jitteriness from a seizure. And what is the usual cause of jitteriness in the neonatal period? It is something which can have so many etiologies, but from the exam point of view, you need to remember that it is frequently encountered in children or babies who are having hypoglycemia. That point is a question for you to remember. So that tells you about introduction to the neonatal seizures and how to differentiate it from the other benign conditions. When we talk about the types of seizure, please note for your exam, this is a very important MCQ. Overall, most common type of seizure in the neonatal population is subtle seizure. Subtle means what? Subtle means minimal. The baby will not show this generalized seizure. I have told you the reasons already because of developmental immaturity of the brain. Subtle seizure manifests in the form of repetitive movements like bicycling movements, chewing movements, lip smacking movements, something like that. They are called as a subtle seizure and they are the overall most common type of seizures in children. Then you have got the rhythmic movements involving the extremities, which is called as the clonic seizures. Then sustained posturing, which is sustained flexion or extension, which is called as the tonic seizures. Then you have the rapid jerky movements, which is called as the myoclonic seizures. Now from the exam point of view, you need to remember an MCQ. Out of this seizure types, which has got the best prognosis and which has got the worst prognosis? Please remember, focal clonic seizures have got the best prognosis and myoclonic seizures have got the worst prognosis among the different types of neonatal seizure. These are all one-liner MCQs to be noted. Let us look at a case scenario. You are asked to see a 6-hour-old newborn with the complaints of repeated cycling and chewing movements. Mother complains of decreased feeding. Which of the following could be the likely cause? You can see that this is a first day, not even one day, it is a 6-hour-old newborn baby. You can see that this child is having repeated cycling and chewing movement. What does it tell you? Yes, it is probably a case of subtle seizures, which is a common type of seizures in newborn. The baby is also having decreased feeding. Feeding requires effort. So this may be suggesting that the baby may be having something like a hypotonia, decreased tone. So which of the following could be the likely cause of this particular condition? Please remember, they have given you different etiologies: HIE, intracranial hemorrhage, hypercalcemia, benign familial neonatal convulsions. All of these can be associated with seizure except hypercalcemia, because remember, hypocalcemia only is associated with seizure. HIE, intracranial hemorrhage, benign neonatal convulsions, all can be associated with seizure. But what is the problem in this particular child? Please note the timing. Please note the time. It is in the first day. It is in the first day. Among the given options, only hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy is going to be presenting with seizures on day 1 of life. Please remember, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy presents with day 1 of life. And one more point, hypotonia is also associated with hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Okay, right. If you could recollect the different stages of HIE, it is divided into HIE stage 1, which is mild HIE, stage 2, which is moderate HIE, stage 3, which is severe HIE. One more frequently asked MCQ is, which stage of HIE you get increased incidence of neonatal seizure? Please note for your exams, it is stage 2. This is also an MCQ question. Stage 2 is the condition where there is an increased frequency of seizure noted in HIE. Please make a note of it. Now talking about the different etiology of neonatal seizure, please remember the overall most common condition associated with neonatal seizures is HIE. I have already told you that it is usually occurring in the first day of life. And what is the common type of seizure which you get in HIE? Again, it is a commonest variety, which is nothing but the subtle seizure. So that is why in a child who is having HIE, you need to continuously monitor the child for seizure with some investigations I am going to tell you later on. Next condition is intracranial hemorrhage. Intracranial hemorrhages are of different varieties, and please note for your exams, intracranial hemorrhage usually present with seizures between day 2 to day 7. And if they ask you which is a common type of intracranial hemorrhage, it depends on whether it's a preterm baby or a term baby. If it is a preterm baby, the commonest type of intracranial hemorrhage is going to be intraventricular hemorrhage, and if it is a term baby, it is going to be subarachnoid hemorrhage. Please note that generally intraventricular hemorrhage is a more severe condition compared to subarachnoid hemorrhage. Okay, the next point I would want you to remember regarding the etiology is infections. Now these infections could be like a torch infection, intrauterine infection like cytomegalovirus, herpes virus, toxoplasmosis or rubella, or it could be a case of meningitis, which is actually presenting as late onset sepsis, which is defined as sepsis which is occurring after 72 hours of birth of the baby. So please remember, it could be meningitis or a torch infection. Then we come to the next category, which is the metabolic disorders. Now this metabolic disorders, two important things I would want you to remember is hypoglycemia and hypocalcemia. Two important condition I would want you to remember. Of course, any of the metabolic disorders can also present, but the commonest are hypoglycemia and hypocalcemia. And one of the common condition associated with hypoglycemia is what? Yes, it is infant of a diabetic mother, where you know that relatively high levels of insulin will make the child to go in for hypoglycemia. Next comes, and the last is the developmental defects, which include something like cerebral agenesis, dysgenesis, all those developmental anomalies of the brain. But as such, please remember, they are all very, very rare conditions. The overall most common condition not to be forgotten is hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Going back to the previous slide, there was one option like benign familial neonatal convulsion. As the name itself suggests, it's a benign condition which runs in the families, which usually presents between day 2 to day 3. And usually child doesn't have a other neurological problem, and the outcome is very, very good. It is said to be related to mutations in the genes coding for voltage gated potassium channel. This is a very, very potential question in the upcoming exam, so please make a note of it. What could be the reason for benign familial neonatal convulsions? One more case based scenario. A 4-day-old baby is brought with the complaints of poor feeding and seizure. On examination, the baby is lethargic with hypotonia and has bulging fontanelles, anterior fontanelle. Infection due to which of the organism should be suspected? Here you can see that the baby is 4 days old, poor feeding and seizure, lethargy with hypotonia and bulging fontanelle, which is actually a sign of raised intracranial tension. So which infection commonly present with seizure and raised intracranial tension? It is nothing other than meningitis. I told you that meningitis usually presents like a late onset sepsis or after 72 hours. This child also, you can see that it is 4 days, that means after 72 hours. So the question is now very simple. Which is the commonest cause of meningitis in the neonatal period? Very, very simple. It's a straightforward question. Answer is going to be E. coli. Okay, E. coli is the commonest cause of neonatal meningitis. Remember, for this particular child, in addition to controlling the seizures, you need to start antibiotics as well as lumbar puncture investigation should be done in this particular child. Having talked about the etiology and the types of neonatal seizure, we now move on to the diagnosis. Of course, diagnosis is going to be by electroencephalogram. Please note that, as I said previously, you need to continuously monitor the child if you think that the child or the baby is at high risk for neonatal seizure. So that is why if they ask you the question, which is the investigation of choice, the answer should be continuous EEG monitoring. Investigation of choice, or the gold standard investigation, continuous EEG monitoring. By definition, continuous EEG monitoring refers to EEG monitoring of more than 3 hours duration. Why this is? Because the conventional or the regular EEG, the duration of recording is for 1 hour, but continuous means more than 3 hours of EEG recording. Okay, right. Then you need to be aware of one more investigation, which is called AEG, or the amplitude integrated EEG, which you can see in the picture, that it is different from the conventional EEG because you are having only 2 electrodes which are recording the electrical activity of the brain. And please remember, this is more easier and conventional to do rather than keeping so many electrodes over the baby's head. So this is a modified form of EEG, but this EEG, this type of EEG is gaining so much of popularity, especially in babies with HI, babies with hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. So it helps to monitor the baby for development of seizure over a period of long time when compared to the conventional EEG. So please be aware of the term amplitude or AEG, especially useful in babies with hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Now next is one more question which came in the recent exams also. What is the initial imaging modality? Remember, the question is about imaging modality of choice in a baby with neonatal seizure. Remember, our priority is controlling the seizure, but once the seizure is controlled, to find out the cause, you can do the initial investigation, which is ultrasound. Okay, ultrasound of the brain is called as a neurosonogram, which can be done through the anterior fontanelle. This is especially helpful in a preterm baby where the anterior fontanelle is bigger compared to the term baby. And in the preterm baby, what is our aim when we do the USG? We need to find out some intracranial bleeding. What is the commonest intracranial bleeding in the preterm baby? Yes, it is very, very helpful in the evaluation of intraventricular hemorrhage. Intraventricular hemorrhage. Okay, right. After the initial modality is done, then of course you may need to go for the higher investigations depending on the need, like CT or MRI of the brain. Now please remember, CT is very helpful in picking up the hemorrhages, whereas MRI is very helpful in picking up the brain tissue lesions like cerebral dysgenesis or other developmental defects of the brain. We have got one more question based on the management of a baby with neonatal seizure. Let us see this question. A 16-hour-old baby born to a diabetic mother develops seizure at 16 hours of life. Glucose shows normoglycemia. What should be the next step in the management? Before I discuss this question, let me tell you the steps in management of neonatal seizure. Please note that in any baby with a neonatal seizure, our initial management would be stabilization of the baby by stabilizing the vitals, which includes temperature, airway, breathing, and circulation. Temperature, airway, breathing, and circulation. Baby may be requiring additional oxygen support as well. Depending on the scenario, you have to manage it. The second step in the management of neonatal seizure is to look for um, easily reversible causes of neonatal seizures like hypoglycemia and hypocalcemia, because they are all common conditions which can cause neonatal seizures. So hypoglycemia and hypocalcemia. Then only comes the role of anti-epileptics. Okay, right. So this is a basic framework how we manage a baby with neonatal seizure. Now let's go back to the question. This question says that it's a 16-hour-old baby born to diabetic mother who is developing seizure at 16 hours of life. Now glucose 6 shows normoglycemia. Why this is very important? Because a baby who is born to a diabetic mother is more prone for hypoglycemia. But here the glucose is normal. So what should be the next step in the management? Remember, a baby born to diabetic mother is not only prone for hypoglycemia, the baby is also prone for hypocalcemia as well. So that is why once the glucose level is normal, the next step should be immediately to administer IV calcium gluconate. IV calcium gluconate. Then only comes the role of anti-epileptic medications like phenobarbital or pyridoxine. Oh, phenobarbital, right? Phenobarbital. Okay, right. Now, what I would want you to remember is, because these correction of glucose and calcium is very important in neonate, you should also know what is the approximate dose of glucose or the calcium which we are going to do. For hypoglycemia, you are going to give 2 ml per kg of 10% dextrose followed by IV infusion of dextrose. For hypocalcemia, you are going to give 2 ml per kg of 10% calcium gluconate. This is a basic step in the management. Always remember, calcium gluconate infusion should be always be under ECG monitoring or cardiac monitoring. Let's move on to the next question. A 12-hour-old baby with history of birth asphyxia developed seizure. Even after giving full loading dose of phenobarbital, seizures were continuing. Which of the following should be given next? You can see lorazepam, phenytoin, diazepam, magnesium sulfate, all mentioned are anti-epileptic. So that means the initial steps of neonatal seizures management has already been done. Now they are asking about the anti-epileptic part of management of neonatal seizure. Before I discuss, let me just make it very clear that the drug of choice for neonatal seizures is going to be phenobarbital. Please make a note of it. In other age group, when the baby or a child is presenting with seizure, the first drug you will be giving is a benzodiazepine like lorazepam or a midazolam. But here in neonatal seizure, that by itself is a question asked so many times. Drug of choice for neonatal seizure is phenobarbital. Now, when you come back to the question, it is already mentioned that full loading dose of phenobarbital is already given. Which of the following should be given next? Is it phenytoin, lorazepam, diazepam, or magnesium sulfate? Please remember, it is according to the algorithm. The answer is phenytoin. I am going to tell you about the steps of the sequence of anti-epileptic drugs which you are going to administer to a baby with neonatal seizure. Please remember, the first anti-epileptic to be administered is phenobarbital. If there is no response to phenobarbital, the next one which should be given is phenytoin. Following phenytoin only, you are going to look at the benzodiazepines like diazepam or lorazepam or midazolam. If there is no response to benzodiazepine single dosages, you are going to go for midazolam infusion, continuous infusion. I am talking about midazolam continuous infusions. Even to midazolam continuous infusion, if the baby is not responding, then it is called as refractory seizures. Then it is called as refractory seizure. In the management of refractory seizure, you have to give some specific medications which I will be discussing along with the MCQ. This is a basic framework of what anti-epileptics to be given and what is the order of anti-epileptics to be given in neonatal seizures. Let us look at the next question. Which of the following vitamin deficiency is responsible for neonatal seizure? This particular question came in the recently conducted AIIMS exam also in a different version. It is something which presents with refractory seizure. I was telling you, refractory seizure. Now this type of vitamin deficiency usually presents with refractory seizure. What is the answer for this question? Most of you got it correct when I put it up in the Facebook and in the Telegram groups. The answer is, it's a case of what deficiency? Yes, it is pyridoxine deficiency. Because basically remember, pyridoxine helps in the conversion of glutamate to GABA by influencing the enzyme glutamic acid decarboxylase. Now when there is a pyridoxine deficiency, the activity of glutamic acid decarboxylase also decreases, so GABA will be decreased. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter that decreases. So relatively there is excess of glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So lot of excitatory neurotransmitter predisposes the child to develop seizure. Okay. So that is why always in a baby with refractory seizure, one of the important things to be done in the management is to give a trial of pyridoxine. Now this was asked in the recently conducted AIIMS exam. Now one more additional point also I would want you to remember is that it is found out that pyridoxine to be fully functioning, there should be sufficient levels of folic acid. So that is why the recent books go on to say that in a baby who is suspected to have pyridoxine deficiency, don't just give only pyridoxine but supplement along with the folic acid or the folinic acid, which is also helpful in the management of refractory seizure. So please remember, this may be a future question for you. Along with pyridoxine deficiency, what else should be supplemented in the management of refractory neonatal seizure? Answer is folinic acid, which should be remembered. Now coming to the last question, in a term baby with seizure, phenobarbital terminated the seizure and there was no recurrence of seizure. The baby is now planned for discharge. What should be the further plan of management? Remember, this is a neonatal seizure controlled with phenobarbital. What should be the further step in the management? Please remember, generally when we give phenobarbital or phenytoin to an older child or to an adult, generally we tend to continue phenobarbital or phenytoin over a period of few weeks or months, slowly taper it and then stop it. But here comes the difference in the neonatal seizure, wherein if there is no recurrence of seizure or normal neurological findings or normal neurological examination or no neurological abnormality noted in the baby, then it is recommended that you straight away stop the phenobarbital. Straight away you stop the phenobarbital without any tapering of dose. Please make a note of it. Suppose this was for an older child or for an adult, I would taper the dose of phenobarbital, then only I am going to stop it. Are you able to follow this? Right. Now here it is already mentioned that phenobarbital has controlled the seizure. So there is no need for me to start phenytoin. Are able to follow? So that is why these two options are wrong. There is no need to start phenytoin because phenobarbital has already controlled the seizure. Okay, right. Now stop for phenobarbital after tapering the dose is also wrong. That is what I have told you. That's a rule that in neonates you can straight away stop abruptly without tapering the dose. Okay, right. Whereas if it is an older child or an adult, you should definitely taper the dose, then only you have to stop the phenobarbital. But the guidelines are slightly different in neonatal seizure, and that is what I have highlighted. So that is about the discussion of the upcoming topic, neonatal seizure, which is going to be very important for the competitive exams in the future. So please share this video with your friends. If you have any doubts, please put it up in the comment section. Please subscribe to the channel by pressing on the subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on the bell icon to get notified of new videos as and when they are posted to this channel. I will see you soon in another video. Till then, have a good day.